The Bible says that train a child at the early age and he will never depart from that. As Christians, we need to be able to really look at things that our children are learning at school. And it's very important to know exactly what they do at school at this particular time and why they do them. Because, whatever they're teaching them is going to affect their future. In school, for example, we go to school because we want to gain the knowledge, and we can be able to also understand that knowledge so that it can help us to apply that knowledge as we live or as we grow up. So that's why as Christians, we need to look at why we encourage people to go to Christian school, or we encourage people to even have a home school rather than going to the public schools or, this private school that they claim that they give our children better education, but you don't know exactly what they teach them. And I believe that with no shadow of doubt, Dr. Peter Hammond have a lot to say about that. But before we do that, we greet you all in the mighty name of Jesus. And thank you once again for taking your time and watch this video. Without any delay, let us welcome Dr. Peter. How are you, Doctor?
By God's grace, strong and healthy.
How are you doing again?
It's a wonderful privilege to be a Christian, to be involved in God's work.
Glory be to God. Now, I believe that you know more and you have a lot to talk about homeschooling or Christian school, So how will you introduce this particular topic to the viewers that are listening to us now?
I'm a father of 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons. I have 3 grandsons. And I did homeschool my children. Now, I was brought up in a normal state school with secular parents. We never had prayer or hymn sing in my home. But even I was in a state school in Bulawayo and Madabiland of what today is Zimbabwe, but was Rhodesia then. We did have hymn singing and prayer at school. And the curriculum, I think, was pretty secular. But still, there was a Christian worldview behind it, even though they taught us things like the French Revolution, as though that was a good thing. Since they've discovered it was very anti-Christian. But I had a secular education, and then I was converted to Christ at age 17 in my school-leaving year in matric, and I got called into missions. Well, I went to theological college later, but when my children came along, I first put my oldest daughter in a state school. We later decided to homeschool all of our children. And so from already grade 4, my daughter was being fully educated at home. Towards the end of our homeschooling career, my wife developed cancer. And so I put my sons into a Christian school. And so we've experienced state school, we've experienced homeschooling, we've experienced Christian schools. So I think I can speak as somebody who's gone through all these different options to the subject.
So let's start with the problem with public schools. So before somebody says, well, this is wrong and you need to follow this way, let's look at what's wrong with the public school first. What is the major problem that we see at public school that can affect the children in a long way or in the future?
Well, the great German reformer, Professor Martin Luther, said, I'm much afraid that schools will prove to be wide gates to hell unless they diligently labor in explaining the Holy Scriptures, engraving them on the hearts of youth. I advise no one to place their child where the Scriptures do not reign paramount. And I think that is where we are. I discovered that schools could be wide gates to hell. What did I pick up at school? I did get some Christian input at school, but mostly I got evolution, millions of years, billions of years. I got situation ethics. I also developed the idea that abortion should be legal. I got the idea that euthanasia should not only be legal, but perhaps it should be mandatory for people who reach a certain age. Like when they reach retirement age, they should be euthanized. I got all kinds of bizarre ideas at school. And a lot of what I learned at school later I had to unlearn. So I think schools can be negative. And talking about peer pressure, my experience at school was lots and lots and lots of bullying. I used to get beaten black and blue by gangs at school. I got into trouble in so many ways. And school for me was a place of getting stabbed with hypodermic needles in the school assembly, blood trickling down my leg. And by the way, the school ethos in Rhodesia was you never ratted, you never told on or reported a bully or anyone. So we would just keep quiet. I could be in the assembly being stabbed repeatedly, feeling the blood trickling down my legs, and I couldn't say a word. I couldn't cry out, couldn't give a sign of being in pain or uncomfortable. That was the kind of ethos. Bullying was so ingrained in us. We would take the bullying, never report it to our parents or to another teacher, and that was just part of the upbringing we had there. So when people say, how can you homeschool your children? You're going to keep them from socialization and peer influence at school. Well, that's a good thing, to protect my children from that. I don't want my children to have to go through the kind of bullying I went through. And for a lot of people, that's their schooling. And by the way, the school I went to was all boys' schools, where the bullying is much more intense. Now, there's problems in the co-ed schools too. But in all boys' school, bullying was a major problem. Although I've learned since that girls can bully in a different way. The girls don't give bruises and cuts and gashes, but the girls can break down a person's morale. In fact, girls can bully very horribly as well. So don't think that if you get your child in a co-ed school, they'll be safe from bullying. Or if you've got your daughter in a girls' school, they're going to be safe from bullying. Girls can be more merciless than the boys. Because the boys, we would fight. We would punch. We would inflict injuries on one another. But then we could shake hands and never bring it up again. And you'll never get that in a girls' school.
Absolutely. Now, I think the other problem that we should mention when it comes to the public school, for example, they teach about this gender equality and LGBTQ agenda, is well known all over the world that, they're pushing these things at school, and this is danger to our children. Besides, they also talk about sex reassignment. If you're a man, maybe they can change your sex to be a woman or a woman to change to a man. And these are very dangerous things for the long way to our children because, repetition is the best way to learn. The more they listen to these things in their mind or their heart, they start adjusting like this is fine, this is right, because they learn these things from school. And another point that I would like to also elaborate is about, the Minister of Education taking control over the children, which is why the system that we are looking, that most of the countries are already applying that, some of the countries, and the majority of the countries will continue to do that, to give the Minister of Education the power to have, the say, rather than their parents to have something to say to their own children. And this is the huge danger, because when it reaches to that point, we won't be able to control our children anymore. And, sometimes, most people in a country like where we're living, most parents, they go to work and then they have little time to spend with their own children. And most of their time they spend at school. So if they're learning garbage at school, so they're obviously going to have only garbage in their mind. And it's not easy for you to come with an idea that is contrary to what they learn at school, because they spend more time with their teachers than what they spend with you. So now, because of this danger, that's why we believe that homeschooling or Christian school is the best way to go. And I know that, we might have differences in belief when it comes to that, but I will take this example, which I also embrace and I also congratulate in the Islam religion, where children, they go and learn the Quran, which is supposed to be in our case as Christians, to take our children to learn the Bible, because the Bible is the wisdom that we need to give our children before we can give them science or the other education. And we as Christians, we don't do that. And that is a huge danger, to lose our own children to the public school and stuff. So why do you think homeschooling is the best way to stay away from all these problems that we are talking about here?
I think you've just proven a point so well. The average child is spending 14 to 15,000 hours in school from the time they go to school, grade 1 through to grade 12. About 15,000 hours in school. They will have spent in that time maybe 800 hours with their parents. Maybe, if they're lucky. They may have spent during that same time about 200 hours in church. But they would have spent 14 to 15,000 hours in a school classroom, which in many cases is what? It's secular, anti-Christian, evolutionary, humanistic, and yes, I never had this when I was at school, but transgender ideology, LGBTQ, you could be a boy trapped in a woman's body, but might be a girl trapped in a boy's body, and all that sort of thing. And all this kind of propaganda indoctrination, along with evolutionism, and then sex education, where they teach, in many cases, they expose the kids to things that are pornographic. In fact, we've had members of parliament, such as Kenneth Meshew, express absolute horror that he was shocked to see some of the school textbooks being used by the Department of Education in South Africa, things that no adult would want to see, where this is pornography. Some of this is so bad, it's not only pornographic, it's perverse. And they're exposing children in not only high school, but even primary school to this. It's shocking in this comprehensive sexuality education, CSE, that they wanted to push on all the children in schools in South Africa. Absolutely vile, pornographic, defiling. And no parent who wants the best for their children wants their innocence destroyed and wants them indoctrinated into perversity that's going to destroy their hopes for a happy family life later in life. The building block of society is the family. And without a stable family home, all of society is going to fall apart, as we see happening. Where they break down the father and they break down the marriage unit, you're going to have a society which is chaotic. Fatherless children running around in gangs. One of the things that's been proven is that most of the men in prison today come from fatherless or single-parent homes where they're not brought up by their father, or the father had no major role. And so many of the people in gangs and in prisons today had a poor upbringing. They didn't have the benefit of a two-parent upbringing. And of course, what they taught in the schools could have also engendered it. And we're not even talking here about the video games and Hollywood films that can often be bad too. The school is so important. The textbooks and the teachers that mold the minds of the future voters should not be in the hands of politicians. It's dangerous. If politicians can control education, determine the textbooks and the teachers and the curriculums, where is that going to lead one? And we know that people who have given the ideology that we need to brainwash the children in schools, that the state must control it. For example, state schooling. Do you know state schooling only really dates back to Karl Marx? Karl Marx, the founder of the communist movement, was the first to advocate compulsory, mandatory state education. Every child must go into a state education. It's communist. This is not Christian. For most of history, people learn from their parents and from their church.
Absolutely.
And the church sometimes helped the parents with starting a school. So church schools were the first schools, and for all classes. You did have, in ancient Greece, you had some schools, but that was for the privileged elite, and it was only for males. Only boys got education, and only of the elite leaders of society. The average person had no exposure to education at all. It's the Christian church that pioneered schools, and the first schools were in churches. In fact, even the cathedrals, every cathedral had to have a school attached to it, and that's where catechism comes from, that it comes from the cathedral schools. The whole idea of education is a thoroughly Christian one, and universal education grew out of Christianity. Martin Luther particularly advocated, the Reformation wanted schools that everyone could read the Bible for themselves and be knowledgeable and ask questions and not be indoctrinated, that they can ask why. So, yes, why would I want to follow a communist model, which is aimed at separating children from their parents and from their parents' faith and bring them up to be socialist citizens, the new socialist man, and basically slaves of the state? So I look at the fruit of the modern education system, and it's bad fruit.
Absolutely.
But I look at the root, and the root is evil. So why are we surprised? Now, when I went to school, I experienced some of the bad things of school. Fortunately, my mother taught me how to read and write before I went to school. And I read a lot of books. And all the way through my schooling, I loved the library. And I was always getting out books. And we had quite a few books in the home too. So I was well read. And I think I learned more of what really mattered in life from private reading than I did from the school textbooks. But seeing how the schools were deteriorating, I had to pull my oldest daughter out of the state school and start to homeschool. And we found our children flourished under homeschooling. Now, people said, how can you possibly know enough to educate your own children? Well, actually, we don't have to know enough. There's a lot of good curriculum providers. There's excellent Christian curriculum providers, and we even started our Christian Liberty Bookshop, which now has 6,000 titles. Back 31 years ago, back in 1995, we started this Christian Liberty Books to import books from around the world to provide textbooks for homeschoolers and for Christian schools. And it's quite a growth industry to such a point. Do you know, at the first homeschool expo in Cape Town, there were just 3 exhibits: Christian Liberty Books, Theocentric Christian Education, and Accelerate Christian Education. At the last homeschool expo I went to last year, there were over 100 exhibitors, I think 140. Interestingly, there's now Cambridge University, there's University of Cape Town having exhibits too. Even the universities that criticized us for homeschooling are getting on board because they see it so popular. So many people have gotten disillusioned by the government schools. And you know, the state schools are mostly dysfunctional. According to the Ministry of Education, 85% of schools in South Africa are dysfunctional, meaning
85%.
85%, that's what the Ministry of Education says, meaning the textbooks didn't arrive until after the final exams, meaning they don't have roofs that keep the rain out. The children are sitting in their desks with umbrellas, with the rain pouring through, where they don't have textbooks, where they don't have seats. The average government school classroom may have 80 children in a classroom, which only has 20 desks.
Absolutely.
So you meant to have 4 children sitting on one desk. I mean, realistically, these government schools are so dysfunctional, they don't have toilets. They don't have running water. They don't have proper plumbing, where children have drowned and died in pit latrines and things like this. The government schools are so dysfunctional that teachers are getting mugged by students, and where students are being raped and abused by teachers. Do you know 14,000 teachers in South Africa have criminal records? 14,000.
14,000 teachers.
Officially. Now, we've got 4,000 policemen who have criminal records too. So there's something radically wrong. I don't know how many members of parliament have criminal records.
And after this criminal record, they still work, or they still provide the service to the public? Or
Apparently. But just think of the results. So, for example, I was shown by one teacher, in fact, it was the principal of a school where my daughter was going at the time. He showed me a memorandum sent by the Minister of Education. The practice of teachers demanding sexual favors from their students must stop. It is demeaning. It's an abuse of your power. Well, of course it is. But this is the prevalent practice. Minister of Education sent this to all the schools. And this was a Christian school principal who had to go to his teachers and say, read this out on order of the Minister of Education. Really, there are teachers who would never dream of that. But obviously there's teachers who do. Teachers who are raping students. And then students who are mugging teachers. The system's dysfunctional. But they kicked the Bible out, they kicked the 10 Commandments out, they took creation out of the curriculum, they put in evolution. And if you tell kids they came from monkeys, they're going to start behaving like it. And when you get to sex education, some teachers said to me, that's the only subject in which our students do their homework. We shouldn't be teaching kids in school about sex mechanics and so on, let alone the kind of very pornographic type of textbooks some of them have. This curriculum is unacceptable. Do you know there are school classrooms that I've heard from teachers up in Gauteng? Your assignment, write a spell to put a curse on someone. Witchcraft, what animal would you like to shapeshift into? Plan a bank robbery. Choose your weapons, your getaway vehicles, and strategy and so on. Do we need more bank robberies? Do we need more witchcraft? But these are assignments. And then they even put witchcraft books like Harry Potter on as set-work books. Now, when I went to school, our set-work books were things like Jane Austen and Charles Dickens and Shakespeare. And now they're giving Harry Potter witchcraft books as textbooks. So there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to pull your child out of the schools, the state schools. As Martin Luther said, wide gates to hell. indoctrination gulags, actually.
I think what most people are fooled with is that they believe that there is some type of education that they receive from, school, which is good for them to get maybe a better future because
Job prospects. Yeah.
Absolutely. The system teaches that, if you don't go to school, then you're a loser. You can't get anything. You can't do anything in life, which is not true. But now, when you look at the reality about these schools, of course, there's some good things that they teach in these schools, but they are very tiny. They can teach which looks like a big, good thing. But when you look at the foundation, the basics of this foundation is destroyed. The concept of God, the existence of where these people come from, all these things are destroyed in school. They don't value these things. Now, if a student or a child does not know where they come from, who created them, why the existence of God is important, why do you think they will submit, or even if they learn science, it will help them? Absolutely not. And that's why the Bible encourages us to get wisdom. Now, my question will be to you, what are the Christians are doing to stop these problems or, to tackle or to deal with this issue?
Well, there's a massive growth in homeschooling. In fact, my firstborn, my eldest daughter, was in the first homeschool matric dance. And that was all organized by the homeschool. So that was a real milestone. So we helped pioneer homeschooling in South Africa already from 1991. I was having conferences promoting it, and then we imported textbooks and helped to get this launched. So homeschooling has come of age in South Africa. There's tens of thousands of families around the country homeschooling their children, and they all actually are having a much higher success rate. So with my children, my firstborn did so well in her SAT scores and Scholastic Achievement Test, which is an American school leavers test, that she got a full academic scholarship to a Christian university in America. And she was a top student and gave, in fact, the valedictory prayer at the end of her graduation. So my daughter excelled as an academic. My second daughter won her national colors in ice skating and represented South Africa overseas in France, Italy, and America at Worlds. And my third child, Christopher, who was homeschooled totally from grade 1, he got national colors in karate. And he represented South Africa overseas, even in Germany, Switzerland, America, came back with medals for South Africa. My fourth child was actually, as an athlete, he was so effective. He was doing the PT, he was the phys ed teacher for schools, for government schools. So he was still homeschooling himself, but he was the coach for water polo, for hockey, field hockey, and for long distance running in a number of state schools in Cape Town. And he's now got his own business as a phys ed teacher, as a coach. And he represents South Africa overseas in Egypt in biathlon, that's running, swimming, running, in the Red Sea and in the desert, and has excelled in so many things. So our family has done quite well out of homeschooling. All of our children have excelled in their fields. And this is something that only homeschooling can do. That my wife particularly geared her education emphasis to the children according to their skills, according to their abilities. Now, no school, not even a Christian school or a church school, can compete with parents. The parents know their children. Nobody loves your child more than the parent. No secular teacher could possibly understand your children or care for them as well. And so our children didn't get a one-size-fits-all education. Our education curriculum and systems were adapted for the children. I personally did the history and did the geography and English with my children. My wife did everything else. Now, we were not strong on science and maths, but we didn't have to worry about that because there's great textbooks written by people who are. And then we had some friends who also homeschooled that we could call on to help our children with their maths and science questions that we might not have been able to answer. So even our children were not limited to the parents' abilities, because in home education you can be part of a co-op, maybe in your church or your network. You know other parents who might be strong in that. History is my strength, science is not. Well, we knew people who would help with the science and the maths and so on. And so our children, I look at the results and they excelled. They did so well, and they weren't being put down by bullies, and they weren't being put down by secular teachers. They were being built up. Their confidence was being built up, and they were able to excel. And I think a key part is people don't need to be too scared. You think, how can I compete with the schools? Easily. Because in a school classroom, the teacher might have 40 to 80 children. They can't give the one-on-one attention or answer the child's questions even like you can. And then we've got museums and monuments. And I took my children to so many museums and monuments around the country, battle sites, different historic places. And my children learned maths traveling with me on the field. Here's my youngest son in the vehicle. We're traveling up through Namibia to Zambia on a mission. And he's following the map work. I'm teaching him map work, calculations, fuel consumption, converting rand into kwacha, being able to understand cost of fuel. So he's learning all sorts of things from map work, geography, and culture. He had to learn about the culture of the Bemba people, the Chichewa people. I got him to meet with government officials in Zambia. And, you know, he's got so many friends in Zululand and getting to mission stations. And you can't compare what a homeschooling education can do with sitting in a classroom with some bored professional teacher going through some textbook curriculum. So I think my children got a real education, and I think home education is superior. Now, if I had to choose, I'd always choose private schools over government schools. I'd always choose Christian private schools or church schools over secular schools, and I would even choose homeschool over private schools. That's from my experience, but maybe a person doesn't have that choice. And I reached a stage where I had to put my children into a Christian school because my wife was sick. So I do understand that a person's situation could get to a situation where you might have to choose what's not your first choice. But we can all supplement our children's education. So, for example, I would come home and I'd read history books with my children. I'd go through different great classical books with them. And so the father can be involved even after hours. And my children loved the reading time. My oldest child loved it the most, and she went into English literature and became a journalist, and now she's in missions. So the more a parent can invest in their children, the better. And the books are key. You know, reading is the magic key to take you where you want to be. And people who think education is the key to my success are correct. But state schools are not where you're going to get education. You're going to get indoctrination. So for education, you need reading. Now, even if you don't have money, even if you don't have facilities, you should have access to a library. And growing up, I must say the library was my best friend. I loved the library, loved going to the library. If you can get books, you can get everything you need. And I would encourage a person to get books. Don't delude yourself that, well, I can get it online. Wikipedia, I need to warn you, is specifically designed to give a secular, humanist, non-Christian view of the world. It used to be Encyclopedia Britannica. When Christians dominated education and all the schools were Christian, the Encyclopedia Britannica was brought out by the globalists with the express purpose of giving a non-Christian alternative to Christianity. And you only need to look up what the Encyclopedia Britannica says about Jesus Christ and Martin Luther, and you'll see, no, these people are against us. They're trying to dumb people down. Wikipedia is the equivalent of what the Encyclopedia Britannica was in the past. And so if you want to be dumbed down and brainwashed, you turn to Wikipedia. Wikipedia will tell you what the globalist, New World Order, secular humanists, evolutionists want you to hear. They won't give you a Christian or moderate or conservative perspective. So as a Christian, go for the books. Every time go for the books over going for online. Online, unless you trust the source. So, okay, if you're going to go to Answers in Genesis to get creation science answers, you can trust Answers in Genesis. But I wouldn't trust Wikipedia ever about anything. Not history, not current politics, not a thing.
I see. Now, let's talk about the benefit of school as a conclusion, because, you know, most people go to school because they want to, you know, improve their life that they are living. Yes. They want to be someone tomorrow. You know, now that's the reason why even us as parents, we send children at school.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to the school does not give the hope that children are looking for anymore in our days. Because if you look at the number of graduation that takes place in a country and how many new jobs that are created every year is unspeakable.
Most of the youth are unemployed. 60% of our youth in South Africa are unemployed. 60%. That means most school leavers have no chance of really getting a job.
Absolutely.
It's shocking.
So now, why in something where we have no hope of really getting that what we call the job or better future, why are we worrying so much like hopeless people to send our children there so that they can be fed with this garbage, and yet they don't get the result that they're looking for? And if we do it better in our home school or Christian school, I believe the children might do much, much better than what they get at a public school.
Yes.
So what advice will you give to people who sees a public school is the best way to send their children, or even if they don't have the capacity or they don't know any Christian school or home school where they can send to them? What advice can you give it to them?
Well, invest in books. Instead of special Gucci shoes and Ray-Ban sunglasses, instead of lots and lots of Kentucky Fried Chicken, Coca-Cola, invest in books. That's the one thing. The other thing is skills, apprenticeship. If you know someone is skilled, maybe this person's a good carpenter, this person's an electrician, that person's a plumber. Have your child apprentice with them. Learn a skill. That will earn you money. Everyone is always looking for electricians and plumbers and carpenters. You'll never be without a job. Start planting vegetables in your garden. And if you've got a bit of space, plant vegetables. And you'll learn so much how to do this. And your child will benefit so much learning a skill. And when you can feed yourself and feed your family, and maybe even sell some of the products and begin an income. And there are children out there who have learned how to be computer technicians from, friends and reading and apprenticeship. Remember, apprenticeship is a model you see in the Bible. Even Samuel being entrusted to the high priest Eli. Speak, Lord, for your servant hears. And Samuel grew up to be a leader in Israel. Apprenticeship is the way that Jesus used with his 12 disciples. They followed him, they learned from him. And I learned in missions, Hospital Christian Fellowship, the first missionary to come past my church, Francis Grimm. I joined him in his mission, and I learned on the job with an experienced missionary. I mean, apprenticeship is invaluable. And there's so many skills we need. There are people in our society who would be happy to have an apprentice who he could train, who could be an intern, and he's learning on the job. And there's so many jobs where they need that. So you can think of people who could even apprentice in helping out in the hospital, in the pharmacy, with those involved in paramedics even. And I have learned so much on the job. And so I'm grateful for everyone who taught me things. And I came alongside people and I would serve them and help them, and they would teach me. And it's a good deal. So if we can find people who have skills in our community, let's get our children apprenticed as well. That'll be a lot more than some piece of paper that says you learned this, that, and the other, which there's tens of thousands of people, those in the society, who can't get jobs. But nobody's going to turn away a competent, efficient carpenter, plumber, electrician. We always need missionaries. We need people who are capable in so many fields. In education, to think my youngest son hadn't even finished his homeschooling matric, and he was already the coach in a number of state schools. It just shows you don't need the certificate. You need competence. And the Bible even says if a man is skilled in his work, he will serve before kings. So
you're saying that these people are not going to get the certification because they're not going to meet the criteria that the government want, and they won't be having the privilege to do any exams because they were not in a particular well-known school. Now, they will gain the knowledge that they need, and they will be able to do the work that they need to do.
Yeah, if you're well-read, I could learn more in reading a couple of books than I could in months in some classrooms. For example, just attending Creation Science lectures by Dr. Philip Stott, I learned vastly more than all the years I spent in science classrooms in my upbringing. Because science was boring to me. But when I heard it from a creation scientist and going to the Creation Museum, I learned so much more from creation science than in the books I've read. So I can think what I've achieved in life has been far more from book reading and joining in with people who are really experts in that field and learning from them directly. Now, if you are into audios, you can get audio CDs and DVDs. And I remember George Grant said, if you listen on a Walkman, audio cassette used to be the way. I know they've got different technology now. But instead of just listening to music, listen to lectures, listen to books. You can increase your knowledge. He said, if you're commuting to work, will use your commuting time, whether on a train or wherever, listening to lectures in your field, whether it's history or creation science, whatever the subject is, you will get the equivalent of a 4-year college degree in 8 years of commuting with a good lecture thing. Instead of music, listen to lectures and books. So that's something that I've practiced a lot myself.
I think what I would say is that we need to be sure that, when we are studying, we have to be able to answer, why do we study? Why do you go to school? What is the aim of you going to school? What are you looking forward to get? What is the benefit of, going to those schools that you are going to? And how much chances that you have to get the hope that you have in your mind, like the outcome that you're looking for from this school. I'm not saying that education is not important. The Bible even itself says that study to show yourself approval to God.
Yes.
Now, education is a key, but you need to be selective. You need to choose the best education. You need to choose what you need, not only to have a bunch of things that can never help you in the future. So choose your education wisely and choose the education for children wisely. Looking what can please God and what can give the hope that you're looking for to your own children. Advise them as a parent, and as a child, also be selective to what you are looking for the future. Doctor, what would you say in a conclusion to this particular topic?
Yes, garbage in, garbage out. We must be very selective what we take in. The books we read, the films we watch, the schools we go to, the class we attend. And remember, there are a lot of short-term courses you can take. So, for example, whether it is the St. John's first aid course, whether you take a course in Muslim evangelism, or even our mission, we offer all sorts of things, missionary training, biblical worldview seminars. There are short-term training programs you can get offered by many churches and missions agencies, which will give you focused educational skills. And if you see something where you can learn carpentry, metalwork, things like that, mechanics, this will only help you. I mean, can you imagine? If you know mechanics, you've got a job.
Absolutely.
There's so many good practical things that people need. And you think, how many people who went to university, they are 20 years later still paying back a fortune for their so-called education, which hasn't given them a good job. Whereas the person who learned mechanics or electrician or plumbing or carpentry, those people are earning a living and they don't have big debts from a worthless degree. And I'm sorry to say, most of what they offer up at these universities are worthless.
Absolutely.
And as for gender studies, and what job's that going to get you?
Absolutely.
So be very selective, be critical. We must learn how to think critically. Don't accept indoctrination which tells you what you must think.
Totally agree. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you, guys. We highly appreciate it for your time. And I want you to think logically and think spiritually, think as a Christian as well, and looking what pleasing God and what guarantees your future. That is what is important, and, looking toward God as well, trusting God's way will enable you to be wise in this world. And everybody on this planet, seek for wisdom. So thank you so much. We highly appreciate it. If you think that there's something that we're supposed to add in this video, welcome to leave your comment below, and we look forward to see you again in the next video. May God bless you.